My name is Elena Whitfield, and my mother was still laughing when the lawyer cleared his throat for the second time. She had $1 in her hand, one single, folded dollar bill, taped to a card with my name written on it in my father's shaky handwriting. My brother wasn't laughing out loud, but I could see it in his eyes, that quiet satisfaction he'd worn his entire life whenever I lost something and he won it. My mother wiped a tear from laughing so hard and said, "Well, at least he was consistent." Nobody in that room looked at me. Nobody needed to. I was the daughter who'd been a disappointment for 15 years, and this dollar was supposed to be the final punctuation mark on that story. What none of them knew was that the man sitting behind the mahogany desk, a lawyer named Walter Griggs who had known our family for 3 decades, had a second envelope sitting in his briefcase that he had not yet opened. My father had given him very specific instructions. Read the joke first. Let them laugh. Then, only then, open the real one. I didn't know that detail yet either. All I knew, sitting in that leather chair with my hands folded in my lap, was that my father had spent his final months writing me letters I never received, and somewhere in this room, in the next 4 minutes, everything my family believed about me was about to collapse. Walter reached into his briefcase. My mother was still smiling. She had no idea that smile had about 90 seconds left to live. For most of my life, I was the quiet one, the careful one. While my older brother Derek chased real estate deals that sounded impressive at dinner parties and often fell apart within a year, I became a forensic accountant, which is a fancy way of saying I spend my days finding the numbers that don't add up. My parents never understood what I did for a living. My mother once told a room full of her friends that I did something with spreadsheets, and my father, who built a mid-sized construction and property company from nothing, mostly just nodded whenever I tried to explain an audit. Derek was the golden one. When he lost $800,000 of the company's money on a resort development that never broke ground, my father called it a learning experience. When I flagged a discrepancy in the company's books during a family dinner 3 years ago, not even trying to make trouble, just making conversation about my work, my mother changed the subject so fast I nearly got whiplash. I let it go. I told myself it wasn't my business anymore. I had my own firm, my own clients, my own life that didn't require my family's approval. But 6 months before my father died, he called me. Not my mother's phone, not through Derek. His own cell, at 11 at night, which he never did. His voice sounded thin in a way I hadn't heard before. He asked me one question. "Elena, if I sent you something, would you actually look at it? Really look at it, the way you do for strangers?" I told him of course I would. 2 days later, a courier delivered a box of financial records to my office. No note, no explanation. Just 11 years of company statements, contractor invoices, and internal transfers. It took me 3 weeks of nights and weekends to go through everything, and what I found made my stomach turn. Someone inside Whitfield Construction had been quietly siphoning money for years through a shell vendor that didn't actually deliver materials, just invoices. Whoever set it up was careful, patient, and clearly understood how audits worked well enough to stay just beneath the threshold that would trigger a formal review. I called my father the night I finished. I told him what I found, and I told him who had signing authority on every single one of those shell vendor payments. There was a long silence on the line. Then he said 4 words I will never forget. "I already knew, Elena." And then he hung up before I could ask him why he hadn't done anything about it. I didn't hear from my father again for almost 2 months, and when I did, it wasn't him calling. It was a hospital number. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, diagnosed so late there was almost nothing left to offer him except time, and not much of that. I flew home the next morning. My mother met me at the door with red eyes and an expression I hadn't seen directed at me since childhood, something almost like fear. Derek was already there, sleeves rolled up, playing the devoted son for an audience of nurses and hospice workers, and for one unfair moment I wondered whether he was performing grief or actually feeling it. Maybe both. People are rarely just one thing. I spent the final 6 weeks driving back and forth between my apartment and my parents' house, sitting with my father during the hours when the pain medication let him stay lucid. We talked more in those 6 weeks than we had in the previous 6 years. He told me about starting the company with nothing but a used pickup truck and a bank loan he almost didn't get approved for. He told me he was proud of me, which he had never once said out loud before, not at my college graduation, not when I passed my CPA exam, not ever. And 3 days before he died, with my mother out of the room getting coffee and Derek off somewhere taking a phone call, he grabbed my wrist with surprising strength and said, "The real one is with Walter. Don't let them see it until after. Promise me you'll let them laugh first." I didn't understand what he meant. I asked him to explain, but the nurse came in to check his vitals, and the moment passed, and he never brought it up again. He died 4 days later, on a Tuesday morning, with my mother holding one hand and Derek holding the other, and me standing at the foot of the bed because there wasn't room for a third hand. I didn't resent it. I had already gotten what I needed from those final weeks, an apology he never fully said out loud, but that I understood completely. What I didn't yet understand was that he'd left me something else entirely, something that had nothing to do with sentiment and everything to do with the 11 years of records I'd combed through in my office at midnight. The will reading was scheduled for a Thursday, 2 weeks after the funeral, in Walter Grigg's office downtown. My mother wore black. Derek wore a suit that looked new. I wore the same navy dress I'd worn to a dozen client meetings because I didn't know how else to dress for something like this, and because some part of me already suspected I wasn't the one this day was actually about. Walter read the primary will first, the one everyone expected. The house went to my mother, along with the majority of the personal accounts. Derek received the company vehicles, a significant cash distribution, and this was the part that made my mother squeeze his hand, verbal designation as the presumed successor to run Whitfield Construction. Then Walter paused, adjusted his glasses, and said my father had left one additional item for me. That's when the dollar bill came out, taped to an index card. My father's handwriting, clearly written when he still had steady hands, months or maybe years before the end. For Elena, so she always has bus fare to come visit. My mother laughed first. Derek laughed second, a short, sharp exhale through his nose that he didn't even try to hide. I didn't laugh because I was watching Walter's face, and Walter wasn't laughing at all. He waited until the room settled, and then he said, "There's a second envelope. Your father asked me not to open it until after the first reading concluded, and after I'd observed the reactions in this room." My mother's smile faltered slightly, more confusion than concern. Derek leaned forward. I felt my pulse pick up, because I remembered my father's hand around my wrist, the words "don't let them see it until after," and I finally understood that this entire moment, the dollar, the laughter, the 4 minutes of humiliation had been designed. Not by me, by him. Walter opened the envelope and read the letter my father had written 8 months earlier, the same week he'd called me at 11 at night. In it, he explained that he had known for over a year that someone close to him was moving money out of the company through a shell vendor, but he hadn't known who, and he hadn't wanted to accuse the wrong person without proof. He wrote that he sent the records to the one person in the family who had both the skill to find the truth and no motive to hide it. He wrote that when I confirmed what he already feared, he made a decision. The will everyone had just heard, the house, the cars, Derek's cash distribution, the symbolic dollar. All of it was real, but it was also a test. He wanted to see who would celebrate my humiliation and who wouldn't. Then Walter set down the letter and picked up a second document, a fully executed transfer, notarized 14 months prior, naming me as majority shareholder and sole trustee of Whitfield Construction, effective immediately upon his death, along with a forensic report, my own report, the one I'd sent him months ago, entered as a formal exhibit identifying Derek Whitfield as the signing authority on every fraudulent shell vendor payment for the past 6 years. The room went silent in a way I had never experienced before, the specific silence of people watching their own story rewrite itself in real time. My mother's hand slid off Derek's. Derek's face had gone the color of old paper. He started to speak, some half-formed sentence about misunderstandings and pending explanations, but Walter cut him off gently and said the matter had already been referred to the company's outside auditors and legal counsel, per my father's written instructions, effective the day of his death. I hadn't asked for any of it. I hadn't even known the transfer existed until that exact moment. My father hadn't left me $1 as a joke. He'd left me a company, a truth, and a very specific kind of justice that he'd spent his final year quietly assembling piece by piece so that no one could claim it was personal or vindictive, only accurate. In the weeks that followed, Derek didn't go to prison, not immediately, though the auditor's findings eventually made criminal referral almost impossible to avoid. My mother stopped speaking to me for a while, then started again, slowly, once she understood that I hadn't orchestrated any of it, that I was as blindsided as she was, just on the receiving end of a different kind of surprise. I didn't take over the company to punish anyone. I took it over because my father asked me to, in the last honest conversation we ever had, and because somebody needed to make sure 11 years of other people's hard work didn't get quietly drained away by someone who believed he was entitled to it. I still have the dollar. It's framed, sitting on a shelf in my office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that sometimes the smallest, most humiliating gift in the room is the one somebody trusted you to understand long before anyone else did. My father never explained himself well while he was alive, but in the end, he explained everything exactly right.